So we got the metaball set up. We can just hide that now. Let's make our way back to the sim up here. And how do we add that into the sim? The cool thing about packed geometry and packed rigids is, of course, they're based on points, which basically makes this a particle sim in many ways. It's a particle sim that also has the benefits of robust collision. So it doesn't just have like a spherical collider, but we can use most of these pops. Pops used to mean particle operators. I mean, I guess it still means that, but there used to be a separate context for it. Now we just have the dynamics context. There used to be a particles context. So when they merged particles into dynamics land here, they kept the name pop on it, but now it really just means these are operators that will work on any point-based dynamics. That could include grains of sand. It could include the points on a cloth simulation. It could include the points in a particle simulation, of course. And it can include the points in a rigid body simulation. So we can take advantage of that. We can take advantage of all these cool little tools that already exist for us. Pop metaball force is the one that we want this time. So let's take it. You can connect it to pre-solve or post-solve. I'm going to do post-solve because who cares, as I've been saying a lot today. We need to point the saw path, as several other things we've done today as well. Click the out, drag it over. There it is. So now it knows, and it'll make a little guide for us when it gets there. On frame 3, you'll see that turn on. I'm going to put the actual geometry back on here. Press play, and we'll see what happens. And there it is, and there it goes. And nothing happened. That was kind of a letdown. We saw it work. Like, this isn't how we've been drawing the metaballs over here. The simulation is drawing this. It's this guide here that's actually making that. So we know that it's getting it, but why didn't it do anything? And in fact, even more amazingly, if we go up to the geometry spreadsheet, because we're in the dynamics land, we have this kind of weird looking geometry spreadsheet. As opposed to if I click on, something out here, we get the one that we're used to. Where we see like our attributes and stuff. Let's turn that back off. But when we're here in dynamics land, we get this. We need to open up our rigid body packed object and click on geometry, and there it is. Here's the points we'd expect to see. Hey, here's that active attribute that we set earlier, and here's a billion other attributes that the simulator is calculating for us. Some we recognize, like v, velocity, w for angular velocity, rest is where it originally was, pivot's what it's rotating around, orientation is what it sounds like. We see some of those other stuff, like the name of rig, the actual names, the mass that it calculated for us. We even have this now, though, force. The force is made by this pop. This is the whole point of this pop, is to sample that metaball and apply the force. If I go to this frame, there's no force. In fact, it doesn't even exist on the first frame. It's created on the second frame, populated on the third frame, because that's when it actually does something, and then it's nothing forever. So we know that the force is even being applied. Also, it's an XYZ because the force is being applied in a direction, because it's one of those radial forces we talked about. Okay, so we know that it's applying the force, so why is it not showing up here? Well, that's because the glue constraints don't break just because there's a force applied. We actually need to break the glue constraints themselves in order to see anything. In fact, the way we will be able to write our own rules using a soft solver to say, hey, I see this force, I'm going to mark myself that these constraints are broken. For some reason, Bullet does not do that for us in the case of force stuff. So in a moment, this is actually where the constraints are over here. They come in from the relationship geometry, which you can see is pointing to the constraint network by default. I'll also go ahead and make an out here to say that no matter what else we do in this SOP area, And that's what this is. See how it says geometry? It's just like our regular SOP context, except that this SOP context is evolving with the simulation. As the constraints are changing, we can continue to change them, and it's a feedback. It's a serial, one thing after another, as opposed to this, which is just, kind of calculated fresh for each frame. So in any case, in a moment, we will break the constraints ourselves. But for now, let's just turn off all of the constraints and just see what happens. Let's see if we can get, now that they're not bound by these constraints, presumably this force should be able to blow them away now. So let's see what we get.